Hi, this is Tiffany, volunteer for the Christian Book Fair, and I'm here to talk about a parenting teen book called Five Love Languages for Teenagers by Gary Chapman. And if you've already read the Five Love Languages for something else, I would encourage you to continue and listen because it's different for teenagers. Also, if you were like me before you read this book and you were apprehensive about the idea of putting love languages kind of in a box, I would say definitely listen to this because it's not like that. So the five love languages aren't about saying like, well, I'm this language and that language of love, and I'm not the others, and I'm not interested in the others. That's just not for me. It's really about learning what your strengths in the love languages are and where you need to improve in your love languages. And then eventually, as you mature emotionally, then you'll be able to develop a well rounded sense of all the five love languages in terms of what you need as well as how you express love to others. The focus is really geared towards teenagers. So the idea is that even if you read Five Love Languages for Kids, it's a great book, but the dynamics of the love languages can change as the child changes into different parts of their development. So the teen years is a very different part of development. And so they go through a lot of changes in terms of emotional regulation, social changes, becoming more independent and self identifying. And so all of those come into play in terms of how they're going to need to work on different areas of love languages, as well as what their love languages may become more focused in. And then also um, how even once you feel like you understand what your teen's love languages are, depending on the scenario and the situation, that may change, and so you have to learn to become more dynamic in your love languages. So I think that's the biggest interesting thing that I learned is that when the kids are little, they tend to have pretty clear love languages that are you know not really wavering a lot. And as you get, when you get your teenagers, I think that their love languages tend to be more dynamic. And so when you read it, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I can totally see that. Like where some kids, for example, they may have had when they were younger, physical touch may have been a primary love languages. Like they would like run up and give you great big hugs. And then as a teenager, especially like after, maybe a high school game or something like that, they may be less likely to just like run up and give you a great big hug. So they might do like a high five or a wave or something like that. And so it's going to talk about those dynamics and how they change. So um, what are the love languages? If you've never heard of them before, they are words of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. And so the idea, if you don't know the concept, is that some people at some times may be more inclined to receive love in different ways. So you can imagine a parent maybe who is around little kids all the time, and the kids are like hanging on them, or they're having to like hold them all the time. I've heard parents say, mothers say that like by the end of the day they're quote unquote touched out. So they have so much of their physical touch needs met that they're like, I just need, just don't touch me, and I just want to do something else. Um, so in that case, you might want to have like words of affirmation, like to compliment or say something nice. As or if you're if you have teenagers, it may be less physical touch and more words of affirmation, where like you spend all day being the growth mindset mom, encouraging and trying to support them, and trying to encourage them to have gratitude and have a growth mindset, and um, and keep them positive, to counteract any kind of insecurities they're going through the teen years. And so by the end of the day, you might be, your words of affirmation, might be like done. Like you just need to relax and maybe just uh, you know have a spend some quality time being quiet. um, so the idea is that it's the love languages can be dynamic. And I just mentioned a bunch of examples of like how parents have to cope with teenagers. He should have put a chapter in there specifically for like parents of teenagers, love languages of parents during teenage years. Okay, anyways. So let's see, words of affirmation for some children are like hugs to other children. So where some children, they get their emotional uplifting fulfillment in a hug, other children may get that from words of affirmation. And then as they get older, they learn to appreciate all the different kinds of loves of affirmation. So the goal of the parent is to be able to understand what is your child's love language in this moment. You want to learn your child's dynamics in the moment of what their love language may be, how to identify those love languages, and then how to help them to grow in those love languages. The book says not to just flat out ask the children, what are your love languages? And it gives a lot of really great ideas and suggestions to be able to help you to understand and determine what your children's love languages are. And so I think those are kind of fun. Some kids, if they're very familiar with the love languages, I don't know, maybe you can't ask them. Some kids are probably going to look at you like you're weird. And then other kids who are familiar with the love languages are probably going to be like, yes, I know what my love languages are, and yours. So it's a great book to read. It could be, I think the book goes by very quickly because it's so interesting, and it's a very easy read. But there's so much to it that I would highly recommend bookmarking important parts, because I think a lot of the parts you might want to come back to, especially when you get into the chapter 8 where you start talking about like how am I going to determine my child's love languages. It has like examples and ideas at the end of every chapter, so you can kind of go back to those chapters and be like, okay, so what were these ideas, and then how can I try that out in my chapter 8 exercise. So one thing I really liked about the book also was that it goes into the history of the change in the idea in the culture of teenagers. So it goes way back into the history of like, when did teenager concept even first come about? And I thought it was really interesting, not something that I'd ever heard anybody really talk about. So that was very enlightening. And then how teenagers have changed throughout the times where the culture has changed and the ideas have changed, the technology has changed there, and how children and modern teens are being bombarded with all these different things and problems that previous generations were not bombarded with. And it tells you that to really help you to understand and gain wisdom and insight into your child's perspective, which I thought was great, very interesting. And then it goes into the different love languages. I loved I love the fact that there was like the words of affirmation. It wasn't just flattery. I'm not a big fan of like just blatant flattery with like no heart to it. And then I appreciate that a lot of the words of affirmation were done in a way that was focused also in growth mindset. And so I think the author could have done a little bit more on that, about talking about the difference between what qualifies as a word of affirmation versus flattery versus, or even how to make sure you're trying to focus it in growth mindset. So it helps them to be able to continue to not only, have that emotional fulfillment, but in a way that helps them to realize that, they are the ones that are doing the work. They are the ones that are contributing to that fulfillment. So, for example, instead of just saying, oh, I'm so happy that you got an A on your test, so that's more about you than it is the child. So I like that it really focused more about the growth of the child. And so it's a word of affirmation, not necessarily in, the A, but it would be the focus on the work that the child put into getting that A. And so I liked that. I think he could have done a little bit more in that, in terms of differentiating, the difference between kinds of affirmation. but really great. The dynamics of physical touch for a teenager in different social environments or different times of attitude, I thought was really good, very well done. There were a lot of references to faith elements, but it wasn't like real in depth. It wasn't. There wasn't a lot of like scripture. There was some scripture referenced. I did like that there was some faith element. So some of his examples might include how to incorporate prayer or a devotional. So I really appreciated that. I would have liked to even maybe see more of that. So it is, there is a faith element to it, which I do love and appreciate. And I think that there's interesting sections about anger and dealing with anger, especially for parents who maybe didn't have a good example of how to deal with anger when they were a child. So that I thought that was an interesting chapter that he put in there, where it was more focused on, parents in terms of what they might need to be able to be better to provide the love languages that their children need. And so I thought that was really good, insightful, and again, chapter 8 I loved. Chapter 8 was really about finding your child's love languages without just saying, "Hey, what's your love language?" So the idea is that you ask questions, you make observations. There's even different experiments that you can kind of do to try to see, are they deciding this or are they deciding that, and how each of those decisions can tell you if they're more of one love language than another. So that was really fun. And the other interesting part is it talks about communicating your understanding of your child's changes into adulthood to help them to understand your perspective as well. I thought this was overall a really, really great read. It's a very short read, and it could be a very quick read, but I highly recommend bookmarking and making it into more of an exercise than just a read. So you're gonna actually practice doing different things. So I highly recommend this book. It's a great book, Five Love Languages for Teenagers, and I hope you enjoy. God bless.